to the What You Don't Know podcast, brought to you by the Know Like Trust Report, which is a simple, actionable survey that asks the most important questions. And today we have as our guest, and by the way, I'm Teresa Nichols, and we have as our guest today Greg Russek, who, I'm going to read his LinkedIn profile because it's awesome, who is the principal consultant at Conscientious Capitalists, LLC. He specializes in B2B sales, strategy, process, and leadership. He also has some experience with workforce development grants and tax incentives. So all that being said, I would love to start with this whole conscientious capitalist thing, but I want to go back a little bit and just say, thank you for being here. And then
My
also,
pleasure.
if you could give us 3 things. So something that will help people get to know you and like you and trust you.
Sure. Terry, thank you so much for inviting me today. I'm glad that we were able to get connected through a networking group that we're both part of.
Yeah.
I think those kinds of environments are really great places to get to know new people. And so, when it comes to like the importance of getting to know people, there's a lot of ways we can do that now that, honestly, just even a few years ago didn't really exist. And one of the I'll admit to one of the struggles that I have when it comes to getting to know new people is that it could be a full-time endeavor if I let it. I'm just a naturally curious person. I attribute that to having been trained as an engineer early in my scholastic and professional life. But one of the things that has, I think, really served me well in both my personal and professional life is the fact that if I can be helpful to somebody, that's what really gives me the most satisfaction. And so, when I think about how could I do that in a business setting, and I can go into a whole lot more detail on like the whole origin story of Conscientious Capitalists, be happy to do that.
Oh, we'll do
But
that.
yeah, so, uh, you know, I think having started my career as an engineer really kind of taught me that you can distill a lot of business down to 4 simple words: diagnose problems, prescribe solutions. That's kind of what I always thought an engineer did. Now, there's a lot more that goes on there. There's analysis and there's evaluation, there's invention even. But, when it gets right down to it, engineering, at least as I've experienced it in my career, and I continue to experience it as technology just goes like a rocket ship these days.
Yeah.
It is about like, so what's the problem to be solved?
Yeah.
And how can we do that?
That's cool.
The whole element of conscientiousness comes into the way I think about things, because I really do think that it is about service to others, and it's hard to do that if you're not trustworthy. In fact, let's just call it impossible to do that and do it well if all you think about is yourself. And in what I like to call, and I give credit to my good friend Shannon for this term, the noble profession of sales, if you practice that profession with only your own self-interests driving you, you may make a lot of money. But is that the measure of success in life? I don't think so. You can make a lot of money by doing good. And what I hope to be able to influence people in terms of their thinking around conscientious capitalism is stop being so greedy. Stop being so selfish. Think about other people. Have some empathy. And what you'll end up doing is probably having a whole lot more customers who actually do know, like, and trust you.
Yeah.
That's kind of the basis of why I call myself that, because I really do think, and I really do try to apply principles of servant leadership and really a bottom-up kind of approach in terms of what leadership is really meant to do.
Mhm.
Thanks to Robert Greenleaf and people since then. It's a principle that's been around for, I don't know, 60 years or so now at this point. Again, if you are trying to serve others, then actually the tagline for my business is how you make money matters. And
Wow.
I think what oftentimes uh, business owners and more explicitly people in the sales profession don't give much thought to is legacy. And maybe that seems like a big word and it's something that like just your average salesperson really doesn't need to be thinking about. I think you do. I think you think about the legacy you leave behind with the people that knew you, your family, your community, your colleagues. If you're a business owner or leader, how does history treat you and your organization? There's plenty of examples in our in our uh, in our country and in our society in which leadership that was just driven by selfish and greedy interests didn't work out too well
Yeah.
and won't
Well,
leave
and
a great
I think
legacy behind.
what's crazy about that is that some of them are working out. Kind of like you said, you can make a lot of money, but at what, what was the use of, making a lot of money and treating people bad? But I think the internet is, sadly, it's a way for people to take advantage of people. And because you can grab their money real quick. And I had this happen where I got a tutor, and it was $50, but the first one was free. So it was basically $25 an hour. And I was like, okay, that's not bad. I mean, that's fine with me. I'll get 2 hours for $49. Well, the next thing you know, they're charging me the next month. I was like, when did I ever agree to this being at like a, pulling every month kind of thing? And
Yeah,
then when I finally talked to the actual tutor, he told me he didn't get any of that money.
yeah,
I
it's
I was appalled. I was like,
yeah.
cancel it. I tried to get my money back. I was appalled. So
Yeah.
it is happening. It's very sad that people do that. And Greg, the other thing you made me think about was I like to say there's and now it's not going to come to me. There's a short-term solution to a long-term problem. And that's what that is. Taking people's money and not giving them good service is a short-term solution to a long-term problem. So, and then the other thing that you said that was really funny, you said legacy is a long word. And I was thinking conscientious is the long word. Like legacy, people know the word legacy, but a lot of people don't even know how to spell the word conscientious. Yeah.
Well, and what I'd simply offer folks to think about in terms of legacy is that it is the long-term proposition. I mean, that's the way that I think if we as individuals and collectively as a society thought more long-term in terms of
Mm-hmm.
everything that we do, I think we would find that there would be there. I don't believe in a zero-sum game. Okay, I think there's plenty of opportunity for everyone in whatever they choose to do. But I don't think there's any denying, there are individuals who are committed to the idea of not including more people in what they're working on, either as a business or even in terms of our own individual sort of communities, right? The
Yeah.
idea of and I've always had trouble with this whole notion. The idea that a rising tide raises all boats is, in my humble estimation, a oversimplification and is more false than it is true. And here's why. Because if you're in a small boat tied to a dock while the yachts float freely, when that tide goes up, that's not good news for you. And it does matter what size boat you're in, right? And so back to it like a consulting and a business perspective, what I try to do is I try to help leaders to understand first and foremost that who you are as an individual and what you represent as a leader is going to have a gigantic influence over the culture of your organization. Like your job is not to like create and mandate the culture, it's to influence that culture. And how do people get influenced? They get influenced by observation. If you work in an organization where the leadership team or the CEO is just a cutthroat pirate kind of an individual,
Yeah.
take no prisoners, slash and burn. Choose your favorite metaphor there.
Right, right.
Well, the obvious question is, well, who do you expect to then attract and retain in that organization? Is
Yeah.
probably other pirates, and and they don't have a good track record of being let's call it empathetic and inclusive and doing anything else except trying to make the most they can while they can and then get out without being caught, right? Putting that aside from a practical standpoint, what I try to help that leader to appreciate is that your leadership and the culture you create is going to influence the kind of salespeople that you have in your organization. Okay. And I've been doing this for 35 years. I've seen lots of just like wake of destruction from high performing, what would be called high performing salespeople, where the leadership of the organization, because they prioritize the sales and the revenues over and above everything else, have allowed salespeople who just leave a wake of destruction behind them, doing whatever it is that they have to do, they feel they
Right.
have, or they feel they have to do to make a sale.
Yeah.
When my contention is, if you're selling on value to your customers, how you do it doesn't have to be talk them into it, negotiate like a killer. I mean, you can win that business when that customer gets to know, like, and trust you. I'm going to
Hmm.
continue to use your organizational name here too because it's important in
Right.
sales to make sure that you're creating value that individual admires and respects.
Hmm.
Because chances are the two of you are going to be in different organizations at some point, in your career further out. People I've done business with over that time span are still people who will take my phone call today. And I mean, I'm not trying to like overly aggrandize my role in all that, but they got to know and like and trust me, and I have a solution that solved a problem, so they were happy about that, right?
Yeah.
That is to me, that's the best way for us to operate as business people. Put others first, you will almost always find yourself with a much more solid, a much more predictable sales uh, forecast and a revenue stream for your business.
So, how do you turn that ship? If it's going that direction and you walk into this and you see this happening, how do you fix that? How do you turn the
Wow,
ship?
Terry, that's a really big question. Uh, and I was going to say something glib like mutiny. You got to spark a mutiny on the ship to get rid of the captain.
Right? Oh my
Um,
gosh.
well, so in a really big picture sort of way, and in a really honest answer, I don't know if you can. As long as the captain of the ship um, is a pirate, it's going to be a pirate ship. Uh, and what I actually find uh, somewhat heartening, I guess, is that the younger entrepreneurs that I talk with, uh, they are they are much more attuned to this idea of empathy and inclusiveness. in the business and in how they want to be perceived in the marketplace. There's always going to be pirates, and there'll always be pirate ships, and they will attract fellow pirates. And that boat might get very big and be very successful from a dollars and cents standpoint. I'm sure both of us could tick off half a dozen people and organizations pretty easily that from the outside look like they wouldn't have the first clue as to what they would be doing differently, because they're pretty much subscribed to this idea of if I'm not winning every dollar that's possible, then I'm losing something.
Wow.
And look, I don't deny for a second that in some instances that cutthroat mentality, that close the deal at any cost kind of a culture, can pile up money potentially faster and even in greater piles than maybe doing things more ethically and with more empathy and more inclusivity, and be really value driven, not just sales driven. That's the other thing I try to help my clients and the leadership and their teams and their salespeople to understand is that you're not selling a product or a service. What you're doing is solving a problem. In fact, I'm kind of on this little crusade to change the word selling into solving. That you're not a salesperson, you're a solving person. Because if you're solving the problem and you're providing value, that customer, again, is much more likely to have a greater long-term value to you and your organization. And it's a business professional that, at least on some level, will continue to be an advocate for you, because there's always going to be a competing solution to the problem you're solving. And the organization can presumably be much more assured that while trying to close deals and make a sale at any cost is kind of how I put some of this on our culture here in America. We've been trained to believe that making money is the one true measure of success. And I just don't subscribe to that. I think you can make money and still do good and still do it well and do it without sacrificing your morals or your values or your ethics.
But if you don't have any, then you're not sacrificing.
Well, so a fair point, except that I would say that the folks that we think about who lack morals and ethics and values actually do have morals, ethics, and values. They're just polar opposites to what we typically would define those words to mean, right? Because something is driving them also. And this idea that this movie goes back a ways, back to, I think it was like in the 80s, was a movie called Wall Street. And the question was posed to Gordon Gekko by, I can't remember the actor's name now at this point, but it's one that continues to ring true for me, at least, and that is, how many yachts can you water ski behind? On some level, the amassing of just inconceivable wealth for your own purposes seems to me to be, I don't know, almost some kind of a psychosis. I mean, it's almost like hoarding. If we were to, and I'm sure everybody has seen these programs, or at least know of them. You go into somebody's home and there are newspapers piled up so high you can't walk around in the place, and we think that person has some mental health issues.
Right.
Well, replace the newspapers with money.
Money. Ooh, yeah.
And again, how many yachts can you water ski behind? How big can your yachts be? And what is it that you're trying to show to the world in doing stuff like that? Look, I wouldn't mind making a lot more money than I do today, but how you make money matters. I think, at least that's how I look at it. And that comes back to being truthful, to being transparent, and to really having a mindset of problem solving in service to others.
So I am an empath. I did not know this word, that empath was a word, until probably about 10 years ago. And I looked it up, and there are people who empathize very naturally with other people, even animals. I empathize with animals and people, and sometimes I just feel a vibe in a room, and it's awkward. And what I also realized was that only about 10% of people naturally empathize. And that was scary to me, to think that I was walking around and 90% of people really don't care about other people. They don't feel what other people are feeling, and they don't care. But that changed how I responded to the world when I realized that. Because, like you said, as kids, we're taught, you're like, yeah, you should empathize, but it's not natural for people.
It's
And it's
funny.
kind of scary that a lot of people don't think that way. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I'm glad to know that there's an empath in the world that does care about people and animals as well. I mean, that's totally great, and the part of the way I would think that uh, the world could be a much more peaceful place with a much greater degree of equity across all the spectrums that exist. But one of the things that you said that reminded me of a kind of a guiding principle is that, and this book was written a long time ago, everything I ever needed to know I learned in kindergarten.
I love that book. Yeah.
I mean, how is it, and this is one of the things that, that I think about at times, how is it that most of us, let's face it, unless there were some really extreme sort of conditions that existed, most of us were raised by fellow human beings who taught us to be nice to each other, not to lie, to admit when you make mistakes,
Oh, man.
and to learn from that. And suddenly, not suddenly, but over time, actually, not suddenly, over time, we then get taught to abandon those fundamental human principles.
Mm-hmm.
We are taught to uh, we are taught to look at our fellow humans in ways that a kindergartner would never be able to understand and appreciate, and we dismiss all of this, actually, frankly, in the interest of what we now believe to be the guiding principles of capitalism. And this is why I keep the name in my practice, conscientious capitalism. And if we look at the definition of the word conscientiousness, it is working hard, knowing the right thing, and doing the right things. Well, if we're going to define what doing the right thing means, I would much prefer the kindergartner definition of that than the Enron definition of that,
Mm-hmm.
or
Absolutely.
the Tesla Elon Musk definition of that. I mean, there's a whole lot of people that give us prime examples, I think,
Yeah.
of how not to think about each other and how
Yep.
not to conduct yourself as a business leader, and how not to create a culture within an organization that still makes money and does good things for their customers. And when I say does good, I'm not talking about like curing cancer and feeding the world. Uh, in my humble estimation, again, there's plenty of money in the world to solve those problems. It's the problem is the distribution. That money just exists in too few places and doesn't get distributed like it should. People
Yep.
will hear that and they'll say Greg's a socialist or he's a communist or whatever. That's fine. They can have their opinions. But my belief is that at some point, we become, as individuals, taught to tell the truth, take care of each other, and and admit our mistakes and learn from them, to adults who now run businesses who are totally comfortable with lying to each other, are don't give a what about anyone else but themselves and their shareholders, maybe. and who are happy and content with this notion that, you know what, there's only so much pie, and I'm getting as much of it as I can, and you're getting none.
Mm-hmm.
Again, not just these are just principles that I just don't believe in as a person, and I don't believe in as a business person.
Yeah.
And if I can be helpful to organizations to figure out not only what's our sales strategy and what's our sales process, and what's the messaging, how do I do good qualifying and discovery and all the things that are, again, strategic and tactical about how sales should function as part of an organization, the cultural and leadership aspect of that organization is going to determine how those salespeople behave, the things they do, the things they say. And let's face it, at some point, the organizations that are big enough that the leadership is no longer really engaged on a day-to-day sort of basis with generating revenues has to rely on somebody else to do that for them.
Mm-hmm.
And if those people who are doing it for them have come to the conclusion that in this culture, nothing else matters except making the sale, then don't be too surprised if they will do anything to make the sale. And the
Absolutely.
leadership could be sitting there thinking, these guys are, my sales team isn't going out and lying to people. But the quota is out of reach. They got sales managers who just beat the hell out of them on a daily basis around things like activity and conversion rates and deal velocity. And pretty soon, the organization is now establishing its brand as an organization that maybe I don't know too well. I don't really like a lot, and man, I don't trust them at all.
Yeah. And
I've seen it happen.
another thing that's happening, and I'm getting this from how you said how you make money matters, is this trend for this high ticket. There are a lot of coaches saying, I'm going to help you get the high ticket sale. And what they're saying is that you're not going to change your services at all. You're just going to charge more. So your target market ends up being people with higher income. So there's this push for this. So I did one of these coaching things. I was like, well, I'm interested in the coaching. Let me check it out. Their whole thing was this high ticket. And I said, sorry, that's not my value system. I'm not trying to charge more for my services just to pull more money from somebody else's bank account into my account. That's what it sounded like to me, is who's got more in their account? Pull it from their account, get it from their account, get it pulled. I'm just like, that's a horrible way to think about things, and I don't want to make money that way. And I said exactly that. I said, this is ridiculous. I don't want to pay for your coaching because I don't want to learn how to do this. This is a horrible.
Yeah. So, Terry, this is a perfect example of how you, as the individual business owner, have to make your own mind up and make your own decisions about what it is that is of value to you, right? And what fits in with your values and your morals, right? And your ethics. So I would say this, and that is that the price that gets established for anything, a product or a service, has to be more than what it costs, right? That's just how it works, right? We're going to leave nonprofits and things like that aside for now. We're just talking on the for-profit sort of. And actually, I would make the argument nonprofits should be thinking about this the same way. Mm-hmm. The price that you put on a service, I think, is best driven by value. And so here's an example. And this is actually like a bit of a real world example from a client. They got a piece of software. It helps with expense management. If that expense management software is able to reduce the amount of money that's going out of the organization by a factor of 10. Let's say that, I'll just keep the math simple. So it's a $10 million company. You can reduce the amount of expense by $1 million. Well, okay, so you don't have to charge $1 million for it, but you can charge something that approaches what that value is, or what that expense is that you're eliminating, and the price is still better at solving the problem and creating value for that customer. So for you, again, you have to make the decision: what am I comfortable doing, and what fits into my my perspectives and framing of the world, and who I want to be as a business person. But when, and again, I suspect that part of what was being proposed to you is that you're undervaluing your services, and you should be charging more, which means you will eliminate some portion of the marketplace that you were serving before, because now again, this is just how it works, right? If you go from charging $100 for something to $1,000 for something, well, the people who used to have $100 to spend they're not going to be prospects anymore. And honestly, this is part of what I help clients to figure out. Is most of the companies I've worked with have been in the B2B space, and most of them are in the startup or emerging tech business, in which they have a great idea. They're trying to move past what I call hero sales, where the founders, who are the subject matter experts, have gone out and evangelized to a specific target market and have done a good job of starting to establish that there is product market fit. Okay. But now they're looking at, how do I go from that to the next level, right? And people will throw numbers around, but they're arbitrary in my humble opinion. If your average deal size is $500,000, then being at $1 million means you have 2 customers. Okay, so that you could talk about going from $1 million to 10 million, but again, it's an arbitrary sort of thing. Where I come in and I try to help them to appreciate, with again 35 years of experience in doing this in B2B technology sales, is, okay, folks, you've established product market fit. This is some of the characteristics that you've uncovered in terms of who your ICP, or ideal client profile, is. You're starting to understand the mapping of your value to different buyer personas. We're starting to get a clear picture as to who's the next customer and what do they look like. But some of this is going to be about execution. And if there's only 2 or 3 of you in the founding team that have gotten to a couple of $1 million, you're approaching maybe this idea that you're going to move out of sort of the angel investor and friends and family mode and start going for Series A venture capital. These are things that those investors are going to be looking for. Is, what's the plan? How are you going to do this? How are you actually going to be able to execute on a sales and marketing strategy? Well, this is what I help you to develop. I help you to test, and I help you to be able to create now the team that will, and again, this is a matter of alignment of value. And when I say value, it's the value of the product or service, and it's your values as a leader and the culture that you want to create with people who are now going to have the responsibility to be the feet on the street, as it were, the eyes and ears in the marketplace. I can help that. The creation of that strategy, is it going to be direct sales? Is it going to be channel sales? How are we going to do this, right? And who's it going to be targeted to first? The temptation with a lot of emerging companies is to believe that, and again, they should have a degree of belief in a sizable total addressable market, or TAM, right? And once you get that identified and you have a serviceable addressable market, that's a smaller segment of that total market, and then there's the serviceable obtainable market, the SOM, which is where you're really going to focus your efforts at first, because you can't be everything to everyone, especially in early days. Pick a niche and really establish it. But inside that SOM, or SOM, and depends on how you want to pronounce it, the SOM, I'm going to help them to identify a beachhead, because as an old salesperson, I can tell you that if you just give me a big list of prospects and you don't really do a good job of identifying for me how you distinguish A, B, and C prospects, how you've identified different buyer personas, how you've mapped the value of what we have to offer to those personas, so that I know, at least to some degree, Where's the greatest leverage going to exist? And oh, by the way, if you haven't spent any time establishing some kind of a communication channel with these prospects, if the first time they're hearing from your organization is from me, the sales rep, wow.
Mm, that's interesting.
You have chosen what I would consider to be the hardest way possible to try and generate your next sale. Because
Wow.
let's face it, depending on whose statistics you follow, anywhere from 65 to 70% of the customer journey is done before they talk to the first sales rep in the B2B space. Now, this is
Wow.
where my level of experience is. I really don't know a lot about consumer markets, except I get endless texts and voicemails from people wanting to either sign me up for something or sell me something. But
Yeah.
back to this whole notion of like, okay, so everything that we've talked about so far ties together in terms of how you're going to go to market. And a big part of that is the foundational culture that you are creating as a leader, the kind of organization and brand that you want to create and maybe even start to think about as a legacy, and how you're going to be of service to others and the way in which you are going to authentically deliver value. If you haven't done these things before, I'm not saying somebody else couldn't figure this out, but again, this is just the pitch for me and my service. This is what I do for organizations. If you don't have somebody like me on your leadership or senior management sort of team, but you are excited, and you should be, because you're getting traction. You've evidenced product market fit. You've got revenues that are coming in from somebody else other than people that just buy from you because they know you and they want to help you. Right? You really are starting to establish your beachhead within that SOM. How are you going to land and expand inland if you don't have a strategy and you don't have a plan that somebody else has done before for others?
What's a beachhead?
So think about uh, what was that movie Tom Hanks was in, the World War II movie?
Oh,
Saving Private Ryan. So when the troops storm the beaches of Normandy, they're establishing that beachhead. They have to take that beachhead in order to then move inland.
gotcha. Okay. That's
I
cool.
don't really.
I
I need your help, Terry. I really don't like military metaphors, but I can't think of a better one.
No, that's good. No. And I love how you're using culture to describe, how sales is going to work. And that's really interesting. I don't know if a lot of organizations put those two things together,
No,
but
I would tell you that it's not common enough. Although, again, I'll go back to what I said earlier about the younger entrepreneurs that I meet, and then some of which I've helped, is that they are more attuned to this. They, for better or for worse, they're not taking the same approach that older business people were taught to take, essentially, and that
oh,
is make the sale at any cost.
yeah,
The only measurement of success is money,
yeah,
and with money comes power. And the idea that someone would uh, someone would lead a large organization and do that without enough concern or attention to bigger picture items than next quarter's financial statements and shareholder value.
right.
Here's the thing I'll say in their defense. They're legally bound to do that for corporations. That's part of that's part of the way the business law system is set up, is that your responsibility is to maximize shareholder value. And if you don't do that, the board will get rid of you and find somebody else who will.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what are they measured by? Well, they're measured by the fact that if it looks like you made decisions that didn't maximize shareholder value, you're on a short leash, and you may not be around, for next quarter's financial statements or next year's annual retreat. And I totally get that. So this isn't like an individual leader issue or problem. It's a systemic problem. And the system that this problem exists in is capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
And if we don't change the way that we operate as individuals, as business leaders, maybe also as legislators and regulators, if we don't start to adjust, and this is where I really have a lot of respect for B corporations. B corporations are benefits corporations,
Yeah.
and they, in their bylaws, they are not strictly prohibited from making decisions that benefit
Yeah.
stakeholders and not just
Yeah.
shareholders.
That is really
And
cool. Yeah.
and you know what? They still make money. They still exist. They do just fine, and they are now, some of the, at least some of the handcuffs have been taken off in terms of what that leader would like to be able to do to establish a better, more meaningful brand and a legacy of that organization than,
Yeah.
oh, that other than they just made shareholders lots of money.
Right. And there's usually a cause, one specific cause that they focus on.
And that's and yeah, so for me at least, the bigger the organization, the more causes they should have, right?
Mhm.
But so long as I think at least, so long as the leadership is focused on making sure the business is profitable, it has to be profitable if it's going to exist. It's a huge responsibility as a leader to make decisions that are going to impact people's jobs and their livelihood. I'm not diminishing or trying to discount any of those really like gigantic burdens that, especially the bigger the organization, the bigger those burdens and responsibilities are. So I don't want anybody to hear this and think, Greg's crazy. You can't just like wave a wand and suddenly be an ethical and moral organization. And what happens to all the sales that used to get made because our salespeople were maybe a little aggressive, but they were good negotiators, and they were able to get more money out of people just by being assertive. I'm not saying any of those things are bad or evil. Okay, what I'm saying is that the way in which you conduct yourself as an individual, and especially as a leader, and especially as a sales leader, is going to impact what your brand and your legacy are and how customers think about you.
Yeah.
And again, this comes back to everything that you're about, and that's how whether or not the customers actually know you, like you, and trust you, not only as an organization, but now as an individual. Because the
Mhm.
bigger ticket that's associated with that solution, in my experience, the more knowing, liking, and trusting comes into play. Because if all you're doing is something that's a commodity, well, it's a commodity, right? And if I don't want to diminish anybody who's in the in the business of commodities, but that tends to be a price-driven sale. And
Mhm.
yeah, you can still get to know and like and trust people within that framework, but at the end of the day, if it's an item that I can get almost anywhere, I can like you, Terry, but if it's about the price of paper clips, I'm probably going with where it's cheaper because, well, it's a bad example because nobody uses paper clips anymore, right? But the whole idea that there's a commodity and it's a price driven decision. I can still know you and like you and trust you, but I'll probably end up having to say, look, for now, I got to go over here because we use a bunch of this stuff and I'm going to get a cheaper price. And
Yeah.
I know you can't meet that price or something like that.
I worked at a fitness facility. I left my job as a project manager and I went to be a personal trainer at a little gym. And the money wasn't great, but it was a way out of a desk job.
Yeah.
So I took this job and they knew I had a business background. So they didn't let me train people. They put me in a room with a phone, and my job was to go through and call a huge list of people. Well, they also put me through sales training. And the sales training was very high pressure. It was whatever they say, you have a response because you want to convert them immediately. And The interesting thing was a couple things was the place where I was working had a very low monthly fee. It was like $50. Not horrible. What they were wanting me to sell was $300 a month. I'm just like, man, they barely wanted to pay 50. This is a huge jump. You think they're not going to know that we're going from sucking $50 out of their account to $300 out of their account. And these people, when I said, I had talked to one person, and this lady, she said, why didn't you convert them? I don't understand. You went through everything. Why didn't they convert? And I just didn't high pressure sales. And I wasn't asking for their credit card. But from that experience, I actually wrote a blog about why high pressure sales is a horrible thing. You know, it's not natural. It's just like a horrible thing to put somebody through. They even wanted me to sell my mother because my mother had signed up because she was like, oh, my daughter is a personal trainer. She's going to be here every day. I might as well join her gym. And then they were like, well, what about Vicky? Did you sell her? I'm like, that's my mother. I know how much money she has. I know she doesn't want a personal trainer. I'm a personal trainer. I can train her. So it was so weird.
This
But
is, you are describing what I would consider to be a pretty classic example
yeah,
of a philosophy of sales that puts making the sale above all else.
yeah,
And look, this is a debate that I don't suspect will end anytime soon in terms of the importance of sales in most businesses. In my view, it comes back to the question of how you make money. And if the way that you think that making money is to be, hyper aggressive, to be talking people into doing things that they don't want to do or that they don't need. In situations like that, I just kind of turn it around and I say to the individual who thinks that's the way to go, is that how you like to be treated?
right.
Do you enjoy somebody being aggressive and trying to talk you into something that you don't want or need just to get your money? How does that make you feel? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's how your prospects feel. Again, there's a broad spectrum of different ideas and approaches to pretty much everything in life, and so we're all left to make those decisions for ourselves. But again, the thing I kind of keep coming back to is that the way I think those decisions should be made is in what way do they create the greatest value in service to someone else? Because that is going to be a foundation on which you will always be able to feel pretty secure that it'll be around a little longer than a transactional kind of relationship.
Yeah.
There'll be greater value associated with it. And look, when the inevitable happens and something goes wrong, there's some kind of a mistake, there's some sort of a change that the customer doesn't like. If
Yeah.
this was driven mostly as a transaction, that business, that revenue is now at far greater risk than if it
Absolutely.
was established around trust, right?
Yeah. We had a lot of customers that would come in later and cancel
Oh
because they
yeah,
realized that they got themselves in too deep. So
yeah,
yeah, I mean, I would always just say to that, it was a short-term solution to a long-term problem. So I wanted
yeah.
to ask you how do people find you? And
Oh
if
sure.
they're ready to change their culture and add value and all of that, where do they get a hold of you?
So the easiest way to reach me is through the website. Everything can link out from there, and that
Okay.
URL is
Mm,
CCS, Conscientious Capitalist, CCS hyphen LLC .us.
okay. I'll put that in
Links
the
to all
link.
the social links, opportunities to sign up for free sales resources are there. Schedule a no obligation, no pressure Zoom call to talk about where you are and where you'd like to go and what are some of the challenges that you face in getting there. That it's all there at ccs-llc.us.
I'll put that in the description under the interview.
Thank you.
And I would also like to give you a free No Like Trust survey. I would like you to take a look at it and see what you think. And
Love
it can
to.
be customized. And, you know, if it's ever anything you think your clients would benefit from is just getting that feedback from all the people around them, then that would be awesome. So I'll give you a free one so you can check it out. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks for having me. It's been wonderful talking with you.
My pleasure. Thank you.